Revival and Reformation. Day number 10. Builder on the Wall. Prophets and Kings, page 628. By messengers from Judea, Nehemiah the Hebrew patriot learned that days of trial had come to Jerusalem, the chosen city. The returned exiles were suffering affliction and reproach. The temple and portions of the city had been rebuilt, but the work of restoration was hindered. The temple services were disturbed, and the people kept in constant alarm by the fact that the walls of the city were still largely in ruins. Nehemiah had often poured out his soul in behalf of his people. But now, as he prayed, a holy purpose formed in his mind. He resolved that if he could obtain the consent of the king and the necessary aid in procuring implements and material, he would himself undertake the task of rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem and restoring Israel's national strength. Let us meditate upon Psalm 119, verses 137 to 144. Zadi, the 18th letter of the Hebrew alphabet. Righteous art thou, O Lord, and upright are thy judgments. Thy testimonies that thou hast commanded are righteous and very faithful. My zeal hath consumed me, because mine enemies have forgotten thy words. Thy word is very pure, therefore thy servant loveth it. I am small and despised, yet do not I forget thy precepts. Thy righteousness is an everlasting righteousness, and thy law is the truth. Trouble and anguish have taken hold on me, yet thy commandments are my delights. The righteousness of thy testimonies is everlasting. Give me understanding, and I shall live. Day number 10. Builder on the Wall. Prophets and Kings, page 629. Nehemiah, one of the Hebrew exiles, occupied a position of influence and honor in the Persian court. As cupbearer to the king, he was admitted freely to the royal presence. By virtue of his position and because of his abilities and fidelity, he had become the monarch's friend and counselor. The recipient of royal favor, however, though surrounded by pomp and splendor, did not forget his God nor his people. With deepest interest, his heart turned toward Jerusalem. His hopes and joys were bound up with her prosperity. Through this man, prepared by his residence in the Persian court for the work to which he was to be called, God purposed to bring blessing to his people in the land of their fathers. As Nehemiah prayed, his faith and courage grew strong. His mouth was filled with holy argument. He pointed to the dishonor that would be cast upon God if his people, now that they had returned to him, should be left in weakness and oppression. And he urged the Lord to bring to pass his promise, as found in Deuteronomy chapter 4, verses 29 to 31. If you turn unto me and keep my commandments and do them, though there were of you cast out unto the uttermost part of the heaven, yet will I gather them from thence, and will bring them into the place that I have chosen to set my name there. Day number 10. Builder on the Wall. Prophets and Kings, page 630. This promise had been given to Israel through Moses before they had entered Canaan, and during the centuries it had stood unchanged. God's people had now returned to him in penitence and faith, and his promise would not fail. Nehemiah had often poured out his soul in behalf of his people. But now, as he prayed, a holy purpose formed in his mind. He resolved that if he could obtain the consent of the king and the necessary aid in procuring implements and material, he would himself undertake the task of rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem and restoring Israel's national strength. And he asked the Lord to grant him favor in the sight of the king, that this plan might be carried out. Prosper, I pray thee, thy servant this day, he entreated, and grant him mercy in the sight of this man. 4 months Nehemiah waited for a favorable opportunity to present his request to the king. During this time, though his heart was heavy with grief, he endeavored to bear himself with cheerfulness in the royal presence. In those halls of luxury and splendor, all must appear light-hearted and happy. Distress must not cast its shadow over the countenance of any attendant of royalty. Day number 10, Builder on the Wall. Prophets and Kings, page 631. But in Nehemiah's seasons of retirement, concealed from human sight, many were the prayers, the confessions, the tears, heard and witnessed by God and angels. At length, the sorrow that burdened the patriot's heart could no longer be concealed. Sleepless nights and care-filled days left their trace upon his countenance. The king, jealous of his own safety, was accustomed to read countenances and penetrate disguises, and he saw that some secret trouble was preying upon his cupbearer. "Why is thy countenance sad?" he inquired, "seeing thou art not sick? This is nothing else but sorrow of heart." The question filled Nehemiah with apprehension. Would not the king be angry to hear that while outwardly engaged in his service, the courteous thoughts had been far away with his afflicted people? Would not the offender's life be forfeited? His cherished plan for restoring the strength of Jerusalem, was it about to be overthrown? Then he writes, "I was very sore afraid." With trembling lips and tearful eyes, he revealed the cause of his sorrow. "Let the king live forever," he answered. "Why should not my countenance be sad when the city, the place of my fathers' sepulchres, lieth waste, and the gates thereof are consumed with fire?" Day number 10, Builder on the Wall. Prophets and Kings, page 631. The recital of the condition of Jerusalem awakened the sympathy of the monarch without arousing his prejudices. Another question gave the opportunity for which Nehemiah had long waited. "For what dost thou make request?" But the man of God did not venture to reply till he had sought direction from one higher than Artaxerxes. He had a sacred trust to fulfill, in which he required help from the king, and he realized that much depended upon his presenting the matter in such a way as to win his approval and enlist his aid. "I prayed," he said, "to the God of heaven." In that brief prayer, Nehemiah pressed into the presence of the King of Kings and won to his side a power that can turn hearts as the rivers of waters are turned. To pray as Nehemiah prayed in his hour of need is a resource at the command of the Christian under circumstances when other forms of prayer may be impossible. Nehemiah, in that brief moment of prayer to the King of Kings, gathered courage to tell Artaxerxes of his desire to be released for a time from his duties at the court and he asked for authority to build up the waste places of Jerusalem and to make it once more a strong and defensed city. Momentous results to the Jewish nation hung upon this request, and Nehemiah declares, "The king granted me according to the good hand of my God upon me." Day number 10, Builder on the Wall. Prophets and Kings, pages 633 and 634. This example of wise forethought and resolute action should be a lesson to all Christians. God's children are not only to pray in faith, but to work with diligent and provident care. They encounter many difficulties and often hinder the working of providence in their behalf because they regard prudence and painstaking effort as having little to do with religion. Nehemiah did not regard his duty done when he had wept and prayed before the Lord. He united his petitions with holy endeavor, putting forth earnest, prayerful efforts for the success of the enterprise in which he was engaged. Careful consideration and well-matured plans are as essential to the carrying forward of sacred enterprises today as in the time of the rebuilding of Jerusalem's walls. Nehemiah did not depend upon uncertainty. The means that he lacked, he solicited from those who were able to bestow. And the Lord is still willing to move upon the hearts of those in possession of his goods in behalf of the cause of truth. Those who labor for him are to avail themselves of the help that he prompts men to give. These gifts may open ways by which the light of truth shall go to many benighted lands. The donors may have no faith in Christ, no acquaintance with his word, but their gifts are not on this account to be refused. Day number 10, Builder on the Wall. Prophets and Kings, pages 635 and 636. Nehemiah's journey to Jerusalem was accomplished in safety. The royal letters to the governors of the provinces along his route secured him honorable reception and prompt assistance. No enemy dared molest the official who was guarded by the power of the Persian king and treated with marked consideration by the provincial rulers. His arrival in Jerusalem, however, with a military escort, showing that he had come on some important mission, excited the jealousy of the heathen tribes living near the city, who had so often indulged their enmity against the Jews by heaping upon them injury and insult. Nehemiah continued to exercise the same caution and prudence that had hitherto marked his course. Knowing that bitter and determined enemies stood ready to oppose him, he concealed the nature of his mission from them until a study of the situation should enable him to form his plans. Thus, he hoped to secure the cooperation of the people and set them at work before the opposition of his enemies should be aroused. Choosing a few men whom he knew to be worthy of confidence, Nehemiah told them of the circumstances that had led him to come to Jerusalem, the object that he wished to accomplish, and the plans he proposed to follow. Day number 10, Builder on the Wall. Prophets and Kings, page 636. Their interest in his undertaking was at once enlisted and their assistance secured. On the third night after his arrival, Nehemiah rose at midnight and with a few trusted companions went out to view for himself the desolation of Jerusalem. Mounted on his mule, he passed from one part of the city to another, surveying the broken down walls and gates of the city of his fathers. Painful reflections filled the mind of the Jewish patriot as with sorrow-stricken heart he gazed upon the ruined defenses of his beloved Jerusalem. Memories of Israel's past greatness stood out in sharp contrast with the evidences of her humiliation. In secrecy and silence, Nehemiah completed his circuit of the walls. The rulers knew not whither I went, he declares, or what I did. Neither had I as yet told it to the Jews, nor to the priests, nor to the nobles, nor to the rulers, nor to the rest that did the work. The remainder of the night he spent in prayer, for he knew that the morning would call for earnest effort to arouse and unite his dispirited and divided countrymen. Nehemiah bore a royal commission requiring the inhabitants to cooperate with him in rebuilding the walls of the city, but he did not depend upon the exercise of authority. Day number 10, Builder on the Wall. Prophets and Kings, page 637. He sought rather to gain the confidence and sympathy of the people, knowing that a union of heart as well as of hands was essential in the great work before him. When on the morrow he called the people together, he presented such arguments as were calculated to arouse their dormant energies and unite their scattered numbers. Nehemiah's hearers did not know, neither did he tell them, of his midnight circuit of the night before. But the fact that he had made this circuit contributed greatly to his success, for he was able to speak of the condition of the city with an accuracy and a minuteness that astonished his hearers. The impression made upon him as he had looked upon the weakness and degradation of Jerusalem gave earnestness and power to his words. Nehemiah presented before the people their reproach among the heathen, their religion dishonored, their God blasphemed. He told them that in a distant land he had heard of their affliction, that he had entreated the favor of heaven in their behalf, and that as he was praying, he had determined to ask permission from the king to come to their assistance. Day number 10, Builder on the Wall. Prophets and Kings, pages 637, 638. He had asked God that the king might not only grant this permission, but might also invest him with the authority and give him the help needed for the work. And his prayer had been answered in such a way as to show that the plan was of the Lord. All this he related, and then, having shown that he was sustained by the combined authority of the God of Israel and the Persian king, Nehemiah asked the people directly whether they would take advantage of this opportunity and arise and build the wall. The appeal went straight to their hearts. The thought of how heaven's favor had been manifested toward them put their fears to shame, and with new courage they said with one voice, "Let us rise up and build." So they strengthened their hands for this good work. Nehemiah's whole soul was in the enterprise he had undertaken. His hope, his energy, his enthusiasm, his determination were contagious, inspiring others with the same high courage and lofty purpose. Each man became a Nehemiah in his turn and helped to make stronger the heart and hand of his neighbor. Among the first to catch Nehemiah's spirit of zeal and earnestness were the priests. Because of their influential position, these men could do much to advance or hinder the work, and their ready cooperation at the very outset contributed not a little to its success. Day number 10, Builder on the Wall, Prophets and Kings, page 639. In every religious movement, there are some who, while they cannot deny that the cause is God's, still hold themselves aloof, refusing to make any effort to help. It were well for such ones to remember the record kept on high, that book in which there are no omissions, no mistakes, and out of which they will be judged. There every neglected opportunity to do service for God is recorded, and there, too, every deed of faith and love is held in everlasting remembrance. Against the inspiring influence of Nehemiah's presence, the example of the Tekoite nobles had little weight. The people in general were animated by patriotism and zeal. Men of ability and influence organized the various classes of citizens into companies, each leader making himself responsible for the erection of a certain part of the wall. And of some, it is written that they builded everyone over against his house. Nor did Nehemiah's energy abate now that the work was actually begun. With tireless vigilance, he superintended the building, directing the workmen, noting the hindrances, and providing for emergencies. Along the whole extent of that 3 miles of wall, his influence was constantly felt. Day number 10, Builder on the Wall, Prophets and Kings, pages 643 and 644. And it came to pass, when our enemies heard that it was known unto us, and God had brought their counsel to naught, that we returned all of us to the wall, every one unto his work. And it came to pass from that time forth, that the half of my servants wrought in the work, and the other half of them held both the spears, the shields, and the bows, and the habergeons. They which builded on the wall, and they that bare burdens, with those that laid it, every one with one of his hands wrought in the work, and with the other hand held a weapon. For the builders, every one had his sword girded by his side, and so builded. Beside Nehemiah stood a trumpeter, and on different parts of the wall were stationed priests bearing the sacred trumpets. The people were scattered in their labors, but on the approach of danger, at any point a signal was given for them to repair thither without delay. So we labored in the work, Nehemiah says, and half of them held the spears from the rising of the morning till the stars appeared. Day number 10, Builder on the Wall, Prophets and Kings, pages 644 and 645. The opposition and discouragement that the builders in Nehemiah's days met from open enemies and pretended friends is typical of the experience that those today will have who work for God. Christians are tried not only by the anger, contempt, and cruelty of enemies, but by the indolence, inconsistency, lukewarmness, and treachery of avowed friends and helpers. Derision and reproach are hurled at them. Satan takes advantage of every unconsecrated element for the accomplishment of his purposes. Among those who profess to be the supporters of God's cause, there are those who unite with his enemies and thus lay his cause open to the attacks of his bitterest foes. Even some who desire the work of God to prosper will yet weaken the hands of his servants by hearing, reporting, and half believing the slanders, boasts, and menaces of his adversaries. Satan works with marvelous success through his agents, and all who yield to their influence are subject to a bewitching power that destroys the wisdom of the wise and the understanding of the prudent. But like Nehemiah, God's people are neither to fear nor to despise their enemies. Putting their trust in God, they are to go steadily forward, doing his work with unselfishness and committing to his providence the cause for which they stand. Day number 10, Builder on the Wall. Reading from Nehemiah chapter 6, verses 5 to 15. Then sent Sanballat his servant unto me in like manner the fifth time, with an open letter in his hand, wherein was written, It is reported among the heathen, and Gashmu said it, that thou and the Jews think to rebel, for which cause thou buildest the wall, that thou mayest be their king, according to these words. Now therefore, O God, strengthen my hands. Afterward I came unto the house of Shemaiah, the son of Delaiah, the son of Mehetabel, who was shut up. And he said, Let us meet together in the house of God, within the temple, and let us shut the doors of the temple, for they will come to slay thee. Yea, in the night will they come to slay thee. And I said, Should such a man as I flee? And who is there that, being as I am, would go into the temple to save his life? I will not go in. And lo, I perceived that God had not sent him, but that he pronounced this prophecy against me, for Tobiah and Sanballat had hired him. Therefore was he hired, that I should be afraid and do so, and sin, and that they might have matter for an evil report, that they might reproach me. My God, think thou upon Tobiah and Sanballat, according to these their works, and on the prophetess Noadiah, and the rest of the prophets, that would have put me in fear. So the wall was finished in the 25th day of the month Elul, or the 6th month of the biblical year, in 52 days. Let us meditate upon Psalm 119, verses 137 to 144. Zadi, the 18th letter of the Hebrew alphabet. Righteous art thou, O Lord, and upright are thy judgments. Thy testimonies that thou hast commanded are righteous and very faithful. My zeal hath consumed me, because mine enemies have forgotten thy words. Thy word is very pure, therefore thy servant loveth it. I am small and despised, yet do not I forget thy precepts. Thy righteousness is an everlasting righteousness, and thy law is the truth. Trouble and anguish have taken hold on me, yet thy commandments are my delights. The righteousness of thy testimonies is everlasting. Give me understanding, and I shall live. Let us pray. Amidst great discouragement, like Nehemiah of old, who made God his trust, his sure defense, and he who was the support of his servant, then has been the dependence of his people in every age. In every crisis, God's people may confidently declare, if God be for us, who can be against us? However craftily the plots of Satan and his agents may be laid, God can detect them and bring to naught all their counsels. The response of faith today will be the response made by Nehemiah of old. Our God shall fight for us, for God is in the work, and no man can prevent its ultimate success, especially at this time of earth history, and more specifically on this wonderful, wonderful time of the spring feast of Passover and unleavened bread. We, Father, want to commit ourselves to bring about, like Nehemiah, making a commitment to bring about the beautiful revival and reformation that you have given us to prepare and to offer to your people, having to do with the restoration of the commandments, the statutes, and the judgments which make up your wonderful law, your wonderful character. This is our request, this is our prayer, that you use us, that you use all the brethren that are hearing this message to spread the beautiful law of the Creator all over the world for a great revival and a great reformation, which is the secret of a true revival and a true reformation, the repairing of the breach, the restorer of path to dwell in, through the law of our Maker. This is our prayer in Yeshua's name. Hallelujah.